Good evening, board members and residents. I'd like to call to order our regular board meeting for Monday, June 27th, 2022, and I'd ask that all those present please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Backman.
Here.
Mr. Brado.
Here.
Mr. Olgiati is asked to be excused. Mrs. Rose is also asked to be excused. Mr. Tominello.
Here.
Mr. Witt here. Mr. Burkhouse.
Here. All right, thank you. Next on our agenda is the consent agenda, including approval of the regular board meeting minutes of June 13th, 2022, approval of the MTA annual dues for July 1st of 2022 to June 30th of 2023 in the amount of $7,248.28. Fire Department advancement testing for Sergeant invoice, and approval of the bills in the amount of $1,233,208.07, and approval of the May 2022 revenue and expenditure report. Looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Is there support?
Support.
Motion by Mr. Badkins with support by Mr. Tominello. Any discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Next on our agenda is the approval of the regular agenda. Board members, we do have two. One is a proposal and one is an invoice. I'd recommend that we add those as items E3 and E4 as
Make a motion to approve the regular agenda as presented. Add on items E3, approval of invoice with Telto for emergency water main repair, and E4, proposal for Premier Concrete.
all right. Is there support?
Support.
All right, support by Mr. Brado. Any discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board. Next is announcements. We have a few announcements. Our very own Harrison Township Public Library has 3 reading programs this summer. The first is for children in grades K through 5. The second is for teens, grades 6 through 12. And the third reading program is for adults. The more you read, the more raffle tickets you earn. The prizes for the children and teens are gift baskets, and the adults will have a chance to win a sunset sailing cruise for 2 on Lake St. Clair from Lake St. Clair Sailing Club. The library is hosting a special officer from the Macomb County Sheriff's Department. A K-9 unit will be on site to help teach about the police dog program on July 15th at 1 p.m. There will also be police dog demonstrations to show what these special officers can do. The Harrison Township Fire Department is also coming to the library. Mark your calendars for August 12th for a fun story time with demonstrations by the fire department. A fire truck will be on scene to be available to be explored by the children after the demonstrations. For more information on these and other great community events, you can visit their website at htlibrary.org, call them 586-329-1261, or email them at librarian@htlibrary.org. The Harrison Township Fire Department currently has an open eligibility list. If you would like the chance to become part of our elite fire rescue team, visit the fire department section of our website at harrison-township.org. Our Parks and Rec Committee is hosting free concerts in Waterfront Park. Our next concert is July 21st from 6:30 to 9 p.m. Light snacks and refreshments will be sold. This second concert will feature Rock Steady. The Harrison Township Senior Center hosts a monthly casino trip on the last Friday of every month. Space is limited for these trips, so please call for details and registration. Our Senior Center also features chair yoga on Tuesdays and Fridays at 1 p.m. for seniors to increase their strength and flexibility, as well as an aerobics strength class on Mondays at 1 p.m. Our Senior Center also hosts bingo every Wednesday at noon and euchre every Thursday at noon. For more information and times and events, you can call our coordinator Jen 586-466-1497. And as always, for more information on these and other township events, you can call the supervisor's office 586-466-1445, visit our website, www.harrison-township.org, or follow us on Twitter at HarrisonTWPMI. Are there any other announcements? I don't know if you want to give an update on the first concert?
Yeah, we had record numbers at our concert last week Thursday. Tin Whiskers was the band. We had record numbers. We even had folks enjoying the concert from the water, which was a first for us, and it was a great evening. Perfect weather right after that hot spell, and looking forward to the 21st of July.
Yes.
Come on out and enjoy a free concert.
Yeah. Featuring Harrison Township's very own Pat Haggerty on guitar. Yeah, so that makes it even more special. Any other announcements?
Just wanted to remind everyone, ballots for the August primary are out in the mail if you've already requested them. There still is time to request your ballot either at the clerk's office, or you can go online and download an application and mail it in.
Okay. So the actual ballots are going out?
Ballots are out, yep.
Okay.
Last Wednesday we started mailing.
Okay.
And I'd just like to mention that taxes will be mailed July 1st, so look forward to your tax bills in the mail. Some may have received them already. If you didn't receive them, you can get them on the website or call the treasurer's office, 466-1440.
Do we really look forward to our tax bills?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. All right. Next on our agenda, item D1 from our finance department regarding our 2021 audit. I'll turn it over to Nikki.
Yep, UHY is here to present the audit for us tonight. It went pretty well. There was no issues, so everything was pretty smooth. And you guys all have a copy of it in front of you right now.
Okay.
And if anybody needs a copy of it, they can come to the finance department as well.
Okay. And are we going to get a presentation yet?
That's coming up.
So we'll focus on the stapled packet?
Yes, sir. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm Paul Bailey. This is Tammy Pitzer. What we handed out tonight is hard copies of your audit report. I think you got electronic copies. I'll kind of just go through what you got. You got 3 binders that are blue binders. The thickest one is about 110 pages. Is your annual financial statement. That's the one we're going to spend the time on tonight. The other 2 are our audit reports for your pension funds. They're also in the township report, but it just gives a little bit more detail. Also, I handed out, just stapled in the corner, a little presentation. As I said, the audit report itself is about 110, 111 pages without the pension funds, so we'd be here a long time if we tried to go through this. So what we've tried to do is just put a few things on some overheads or on PowerPoint that we'll go through and talk about. If you have any questions, feel free to stop me. And if you turn in just past the title page. When you're looking at your audit report, one of the first things you're going to see in that report, just when you go past the table of contents, is what they call the independent auditor's report. And this is really the only portion of the report that belongs to UHY. You have what they call an unmodified or clean opinion. That's what you're striving for. After you approve it tonight, tomorrow we'll push a button. We're required to electronically upload it to the state of Michigan once the township board approves it. So that will go tomorrow morning. But again, you have an unmodified or clean opinion. That's what you're striving for, and when they get it, that's what they're looking for. The next, page 3 on the slides is what they call the statement of net position. In your audit report, there's really 2 sets of financial statements. There's a commercial way of looking at the township, and there's a traditional way the township is reported. Page 3 is a commercial way. It includes the book value of all your assets, this building, any buildings you own, cars, things like that, as well as any liabilities that the township may owe. And I put this in here just to give you an idea if you start looking at it. If you look at kind of the bottom line, you'll see the first column, your governmental activities, which is basically everything other than your water and sewer fund. You're actually in what they call a deficit condition. Now, don't get too alarmed, a lot of governmental units have that on the commercial side because you recorded your pension liability. If you go halfway up the page, you'll see your net OPEB liability and your net pension liability. And that amounts to about $34 million when you add them together. So I just wanted to kind of go through that. The state of Michigan Department of Treasury don't really consider this page a deficit or anything when they look at it. They concentrate more on the traditional way governments have reported, which is what we're going to spend the rest of this presentation on. The next slide, slide number 4, we get into your general fund. Again, this is the traditional ways townships have reported for a number of years. Your general fund had assets of $3,740,000. You had liabilities and deferred inflows of $555,866. So as of December 31st, 2021, your fund balance was $3,184,389. And you can see the 2020 numbers next to it there. Page 5 is what they call your statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance for your general fund. This year, your general fund took in $3,682,846. You spent $3,111,219. You have what they call other financing sources uses, which is primarily transfers to other funds of $332,619. So when all said and is done, your general fund had revenues over expenditures of $239,008. And you can compare, that was compared to $234,211 the year before. We always kind of give you a graph, page 6 there, just gives you a graph of where your dollars come from. This year, the intergovernmental revenue was up pretty significantly, as most governmental units. You'll see that made up about 73% of your general fund revenues this year, compared to about 66% last year.
Is that because of the ARPA money? Is it?
No, this is just extra money that came through the state, and it's a couple some other grants, but it's not the American Relief
Okay.
money. No. Page 7 just gives you a pie graph of your expenditures. Your general fund spends approximately 78% of their money on what they call general government. That's a big category that includes a lot of things such as supervisor, clerk, treasurer. We'll break that down in a few minutes. You'll see that was compared to about 75% the year before. Transfers was up a little bit this year because you had to make an additional debt payment to your 2020 bond debt fund, so you transferred money to your bond debt, and that's why the transfer percentage is up a little bit. The next page kind of takes your the general government that we just talked about, that 73%, and kind of just breaks it down, all the different categories in there. You'll see the biggest piece of that is the administration. This year that it was 30%, and the reason for that is there was a lot of capital outlay in 2021 that didn't occur in 2020, so your piece of your pie is a lot larger, but you can see the cable TV, the grounds hall equipment, they're 10%, treasurer's office about 12%, accounting 10%, and you go around. Just gives you an idea where that general pie piece went to.
Excuse me, what, you said administration capital outlay example?
Yeah, can you go through those?
Sure. $200,000 was actually sent over to the water and sewer funds for purchasing
building?
the building, right, for the police mini station.
Okay.
That was a big chunk of it, and then there was other various smaller pieces of equipment that were
Okay.
purchased.
That's, I was wondering when that was gonna show up, so
Yep.
that's it,
That's
okay,
it.
thank you.
Page 9 breaks your fund balance down. There's really 3 classifications of your fund balance. Your total fund balance on the right-hand side is still that $3,184,389, but there's 3 classifications. The first category is called non-spendable. It's $1,261,755. And that's money that you've loaned to other township funds to do projects and so forth. It'll eventually flow back into the general fund, but in the short term, you can't spend it again because you've loaned it out to somebody. So it's an asset of the general fund, but it's not spendable, so they call it non-spendable, definitely, because it's not spendable. So that's a pretty good sized piece of that $3,184,000. The next column is what they call a committed assigned, $90,047. That's equal to the Bridgeview note that you have out there outstanding. Every year you set that aside, just so you know you had money to pay that note off of $90,047. And that leaves the unassigned fund balance of $1,832,587. And those three add to that $3,184,389. I mean, we give you a 5-year history here just so you can kind of get an idea of, you know, how it's changed from year to year. Slide number 10 just gives you a bar graph of your fund balance from 2017 through 2021. You'll seem pretty consistent. The last 3 years it's went up slightly each of the last 3 years. I commend you on controlling your budget in difficult times. So, but again, slide 11. In addition to the general fund, as you're well aware, there's a lot of other funds that are used to control various activities, such as police, fire, grant. And you can see the revenues and expenditures of each of those funds here. We've kind of just summarized them for you. The fire fund ended up, you can see the very right-hand side of the column, $251,829 to the good. The police was $70,623 to the good. The grant fund just was a break even. Parks and Rec was $230 to the good. The CARES Act was $73. That's just basically interest earned on the CARES. Building inspection, basically when you had to transfer in about $80,000, that broke even. Your beautification fund was to the good, $3,708. Your debt service fund, the debt service fund was $228 to the good. The 2020 bond issue, revenues equal expenditure. What happens there is you transfer from other funds the exact amount of the debt payment, and then you pay the debt payment, so it clears itself. Then you have what they call capital projects funds, money you set aside to do major capital projects. You have a special assessment revolving fund, and they were to the positive $204,000. The building and site fund didn't have any activity. The 2020 bond construction fund, you used up $2,154,027. Again, as you're well aware, you sold your bond issue in 20, and you used some of it up in 20, and you're still continuing the projects in 21. Fire equipment replacement is a new fund this year that you set up to kind of set aside money for future fire equipment and replacement. Was to the positive. You transferred in from the fire fund $154,720. Slide 12 just takes those same funds and shows you what their fund balance was as of December 31st, 2021. Second column from the right is the total, and just whether it's restricted or committed or unassigned. Most of the money in these funds are either restricted or committed. You'll see your fire had a fund balance of $630,000, your police $309,000, your grant $40,000, your Parks and Rec $8,032, CARE $73, building inspection $39,164, beautification $3,708, your debt service fund $257,543. And then you can see your special assessment revolving fund actually had a deficit of $1,233,000. What's happened in this fund is you've done projects before you've assessed them, so you've had expenses before you've assessed the tax, your constituents out there. And I know I've seen on the agenda you have a deficit reduction plan after my presentation. Your building and site fund was to the good. It has a fund balance of $3,284. The 2020 bond issue fund has a fund balance of $774,405, and the fire equipment of $154,720. Page 13 gets into your water and sewer funds. There's basically three funds that make up your water and sewer fund. The first fund is what we call the operating fund, where most of the activity takes place. And if you go down there, I'm not gonna go through the whole calculation. It starts out with operating revenues and backs out operating expenses. But the very last thing on that first column, the way we take a look at it more on a cash basis, you were $188,392 to the good, positive. Then you also have your capital replacement, which I've kind of included with the operating of 2,194. But you also have a column called your Macomb-Oakland interface. As you're well aware, you have to pay a lot of their Macomb and Oakland drain districts, and you levy debt service charges to pay off their the bond debt and notes as due. That fund was to the good $221,145 this year, so they come back. And then your refuge fund, you can see revenues of $1,216,000, expenses of $1,162,000, so you're $53,030 to the positive.
I guess I don't know who to direct this question towards.
Okay.
So the Highland Park funds that were paid, is it in this, it's not captured here?
No, it wouldn't be captured here, so GLWA might have a statement that acknowledges that, but GLWA has put that into the rates, so it isn't gonna be broken out. in any
Okay, so
way
it's not
else.
gonna be a,
Yeah, so if they said, hey, you owe us $2 million for water, somewhere in that $2 million, in their statements, it would say this portion was for bad debt, our share of that from prior years. As we know, moving forward, they're not.
yeah, I was just, okay.
Upcoming year, but no, it wouldn't be broken out, it's kind of buried, buried is maybe not the right word, but it's not acknowledged.
From them, they didn't break it out, they said, here's your bill.
Yeah, so right, exactly, it was actually, this upcoming year was the first time they said, let's list it as a line item, which generated some of the attention, which led to the change in how it's handled.
Okay, thank you.
Page 14 just takes those proprietary funds, the water and sewer funds, and just shows you if you take all your current assets and pay off your current liabilities, how much you'd have left over. Your water and sewer fund would have about $5.7 million. Your capital replacement would have about $2.4 million. The Macomb would be a negative of $679,000, and your refuge would be $378,000 to the good. But just kind of gives you on a short-term basis, I take my cash, pay off all my bills, how much do I have left over to do projects if I had to. Page 15, in addition to funds that operate within a township, there's what they call component units. These entities have separate boards, but because they operate so intertwined with the township, they've got to be included as part of the township financial statement. We got the first column is the DDA. You'll see their revenues of $54,000. They had $4,000 expenditures, so they were $50,485 to the good. The library, they had revenues this year of $522,383, expenditures of $414,000, so they were $108,000 to the good. And your EDC was $5,336,000 revenues over expenditures. Page 16, or slide 16, is basically a summary of your pension plans, or the first column is your fireman's pension trust. You can see the contributions that was made of $1,739,000. Your investment income was $1,785,000. So total additions to the fund was $3,524,000. Deductions, the benefits paid was $1,718,000. Some administrative fees of $19,000. So you actually had an increase in your plan net assets of $1,786,733. That's revenues over expenditures. You can see your employees' trust system next to it. You were $1,904,382, revenues over expenses. and your retiree healthcare was to the positive $746,539. So really a pretty good year for all your pension funds. One thing I do warn is that it was as of asset value as of December 31st, as we know the markets have adjusted a little bit since then. Page 17. This just takes the total township and says, okay, if I take $1 that come into the township, where did we spend it? And the biggest piece is always the water and sewer and the public safety. This year, about 36% of expenditures was incurred to provide water and sewer services. Public safety was about 37%, and you can see it's pretty close from year to year. You'll see 39 on public safety last year, and 37 on water and sewer there. That is a very, very quick synopsis of the numbers. Anything anybody would like me to spend more time with?
I'm just, I'm back on slide 14, I'm trying to figure out the 2021 working capital and how I'm reading this chart. So if I remember, you said a water and sewer, working capital $5,731,307, and capital replacement, so now we're going horizontal across that column?
Yeah, kind of just, yes.
Going across,
Yes.
so capital replacement, would I subtract that from the 5 points?
No, that's on top of the 5.
That's on top of it?
Right.
Okay. And then, I'm just struggling with how this is, it looks. I understand the bottom line is the 693,284 is from 20 to 21 difference.
Yes, sir.
So can you just explain what the working capital is and how come it, when we get to the right, if it's on top, if the 2.4 is on top of the 5.7, then it would be, is the 679 subtracted from it?
That's a whole separate fund. These are
Separate.
four
So these are
individual
separate?
funds.
Yes,
They're four
they're
things.
totally
They don't mean
separate.
anything each other left or right, only up and down.
It's vertical.
There's no relationship between these four.
Okay, because I was struggling with the 378 is, what you mentioned is to the good, is what you said.
Right.
And
So I was just
that's-
wondering how we got to,
That's just our GFL bills.
okay,
That's refuse fund.
Yeah, those are four different
accounts.
Four different
I'm
accounts.
doing math, I'm going, man,
That's okay.
it's been a while.
I'm no auditor, but I can do better than this.
What do we pay them? Okay, now it makes sense. Thank
Macomb Oakland is our debt that we pay for that maintenance of the system. Capital replacement is money we set aside for the water and sewer fund for improvements in the system. And then obviously the water and sewer is our operating fund for water and sewer. So not that all four are anything to do with each other, the first two are very closely tied, and we can choose to pay for water and sewer improvements out of either of those items. So if we say, if Dave came in next week and said, I wanna spend $2 million on a sewer upgrade, we could choose to pay it out of either savings account.
Okay. Perfect, thank you. Good explanation.
Well, so I do have a couple of questions. So since we're on page 14, looking at the Macomb Oakland interface, but then if I jump back to page 13 and I look at those two, and I think I know the answer, but I want to ask the question. So if I look at page 13 specifically, my observation is, hey, I've got for the Macomb Oakland Interceptor Fund, hey, we're ahead 221,000. That's the way I read that. But then I look and I say, well, how did we go backwards in the Macomb Oakland Interceptor? And I think some of this has to do with this notion of depreciation versus cash. Is that fair?
No, basically, the 221 is what you had revenues over expenditures this year. So that was kind of like your gain for the 2021.
Yep.
Now, the working capital, the reason it's a negative is the current portion of all the bonds that you owed for the Oakland and Macomb drains
Mhm.
is shown as a current liability. So you're gonna be collecting that over the next year to pay the bonds, but if, on a financial statement, it shows as a current liability, so that's why it's a negative amount, it's kind of a technicality there. But you pay those off during the year with, as in twenty-two,
Gotcha.
as you.
That's kind of a snapshot at a
Yes,
point in
yes,
time.
you're right.
And I think more specifically, the reason why I ask is because if I go back to page 13, I know that we had adjusted the amount per unit of sewer for MCOC, what we call it. But we also had some additional revenues in 21 that had spilled over from 20. And so we show kind of like we're ahead to 21 in the year 2021. But we showed that we were behind in 2020 because some people didn't pay their bills. But we're not like, when I go to page 14, we're not like, holy smokes, you're behind 400 and some thousand revenues over expenditures, you've got to change that rate.
Yeah.
So, good, okay. And then this is a generic statement, but it's something that I think we're gonna talk about at a future meeting, so if you could bear with me. If we go to page 5, for general fund, we're saying that, according to page 5, we banked $239,000 for general fund.
Yes, sir.
Okay? And then if we go ahead to page 11, based on the numbers on page 11, I could say that we started this fire equipment and replacement fund, that's shown at the bottom, that's $154,000. But then even with that, we still were ahead $251,000 in fire.
Yes, sir.
Yep. And then finally, if I go to page 13, at the bottom of page 13, the numbers would suggest that the water and sewer fund was ahead $188,000 as well. Right?
Yes.
And the reason why I say it, and I know it isn't this subject, but I'm gonna make reference to those three numbers at our next meeting, because based on this report, I'm gonna recommend, just because we saw, hey, we've got an OPEB liability of over $20 million. Well, we're not gonna eat that elephant all at one bite, but we could probably afford to pull $100,000 out of general fund, $100,000 out of fire fund, and $100,000 out of water and sewer fund. Put that in, we're still ahead for the year in all three funds. It's not really booked in 2021's numbers, but it's a rose by any other name. Market's kind of down right now, maybe it's a time to throw a couple, 100,000 from each fund into that OPEB fund. It really has nothing to do with your report, but I wanted to make reference so that if we got to that subject 2 weeks from now and I say, hey, I want to put 300 grand away into the OPEB fund, where at least we're buying when things are low and it can earn a greater level of interest, that we can raise, so you can say, I remember asking the auditor that we're ahead in those three funds more than the 100,000 that Ken might suggest. Doesn't mean you have to vote for it, but I just want to make sure that question, if there was a question there, that it would be answered now. That's all I had.
Well, yeah, I guess we'll talk about that when we talk about that.
Yeah, you could say I disagree, but.
No,
my
no, no,
point
no, no,
is-
I'm looking at what it was last year
What's
compared
that?
to what it is this year, the pension liability.
Okay, which page are you on?
Page 3.
Okay.
It looked like it went down substantially. I mean, compared to, 20-some million is a lot of money. Excuse me, 30-something million is a lot of money.
Well, we've gone from, so in 2020, we had a liability of 20 million, 20.8, now we're at 20.1 million. So it's not that's really just kind of an interest thing, I think.
But then it increased on the other one from 4.8 to 5.7,
Which one, where's that?
the business type activities.
And remember, that's not your water and sewer fund. If you really, your total OPEB liability is the 2152 plus the 5,760,000. So your net OPEB liability is somewhere around $26 million.
I circled the wrong number, so.
And your pension is about 26 million also, 26 million in the category. It's those two columns together. But they did have a good year. When we go back to that column, that page, one of the last pages I talked about, on page 16. First of all, every year your actuary does a recalculation of what he estimates the liability. I'm
Yep.
telling you stuff I know you already know.
No, but this is good.
But also about 2/3 the way down the page, remember you see the net increase in plan net position, okay? The fireman's was to the good this year, 1,786,000, so that would, if everything else stayed status quo, that would drop your liability because you know, your investments did very, very well, like a lot of, you know, communities, a lot of places in the stock market. You put a lot more money than you spent this year by 1,786,000. The employee's retirement was 1,904,000 to the good when you just go left to right, and your healthcare was 746 for a total positive of 4,437,654. So that's part of the reason the liability would drop is how well the stock market did in 21. Also, you know, again, the actuaries look at the liability each year.
And I guess that was my point, is that, you know, from year to year, it looked like it was a positive change.
Right, so let me say, and again, it's a part of a future discussion, but let's just say we talk about three $100,000 transfers. That $100,000 is probably making 50 cents. If I put 100 grand in here, it's gonna make, you know, we project over the long haul between 6 and 7%. So I've got a $26 million liability, I'm not gonna get rid, that $26 million liability is gonna go away by having, number one, nobody new going in, getting retiree health care, but us gradually putting money in as well as paying as we go. And eventually that 6 million that we've got in here, 5.9 million, if all I did was just throw in that 300,000, hey, I mean, it suggests that we're over 6 million, but that's gonna continue. So if we continue to contribute small amounts when we can, when we have a surplus, realize some interest as the market performs over the long haul, eventually that liability, future liability of people who we have to give health care to is gonna go away, that balance is gonna come up, and that's, you know, some future board members are gonna be able to use this to pay for benefits and guarantee the benefits that our employees were promised.
Right.
So, but again, it's not really germane to this, but if I say to you, hey, we made more than 100,000 in these three accounts, I wanted to just talk about that, take a minute, and then we can discuss whether it's a good or bad idea, or, you know, to fund it or not.
Okay, if I can just spend a couple minutes, in addition to the audit report, I think in the back of the big report, there's a couple letters that were just stuck in the back. And I think you also have them electronically. The first one I'd like to talk about, it says independent auditor's report on internal control on the top. It's just a one-page letter. When we come in to do your audit, we spend a lot of time with the numbers, definitely verifying the numbers to make sure what you say is in the bank says is in the bank, and when you say, you know, you've got a receivable there, we test to make sure it's a good receivable, things like that. But we also spend a lot of time testing your internal control, making sure that there's segregation of duties between the departments and so forth. Again, this year, I'm happy to report there was no material weaknesses in your system. The state statutes, if you follow it, does a very good job of separating duties, and you do a good job of doing that. The treasurer's department, you know, collects the money, the clerk's department writes the bills. I mean, I'm being very simplistic, but, you know, prepares the checks and so forth. And if you follow that, it's usually pretty good. But again, you had no what we call material weaknesses, and that's what this letter indicates. The second letter is an audit communication letter. Because CPA firms aren't required to come to a meeting like this, we always have to answer any question and explain anything that we, in more detail. This letter just kind of goes through the audit process, whether we had any difficulties with the audit. We didn't have any difficulties. Thankfully, we got to get back on site this year. Nikki had things ready for us. We use a special software where everything is uploaded. She had everything very uploaded. We were getting stuff all kinds of days and night, times and nights through there. So we appreciate all that upload, but we still do come out here, do most of the audit on site. I mean, we had a couple of years there with the COVID that we were unable to actually come out. But that letter just explains whether there was anything. It says significant audit findings. That's just a generic heading. Doesn't really mean we had any major findings. First of all, it talks about estimates. One of the things when we do an audit report, Not every number is tied out right to the dollar. There's a lot of estimates in your financial statements. Going back to the pension liabilities, how long people will live, how much you're gonna have to pay. That's a huge estimated liability that the actuary does, things like that. Unbilled water and sewer, and that just kind of explains some of the bigger estimates in your financial statement. On the top of page 2, we just kind of go through a few of the more significant notes that's in that financial statement. One talks about how much of your money is FDIC insured, and then kind of your pension plans there. Difficulties during the audit, we didn't have any difficulties. Corrected and uncorrected misstatements, when we're doing the audit, if we work back and forth and we're suggesting changes on anything, we just have to list them here. We've done a couple where we worked back and forth and we suggested some changes and management agreed there. And then on the very last page, on page 3, on the top of page 3, any disagreements with management. We haven't had any disagreements. I've never had that problem. We'd have been to the board a lot quicker than this if that would have occurred. Management representation, after we're done the audit, we give your staff a letter that says, as far as they know, the numbers are accurate, so forth. That's been standard practice for 30 or 40 years. And so this letter kind of just outlines the audit process. And then we attach, if we talk about anything during the draft meeting, when we get the audit all done, it takes us a couple, after we pull out of the field, it takes about a month to 6 weeks for us to pull it all together. We then come down and usually meet with the supervisor, clerk, and treasurer, and spend somewhere 2 hours, 3 hours, and we go through it page by page. And we talk about a lot of different things. And if there's a few things we talk about that we just want that can make things just a little bit better, or we'd like to see changed, we put them on the back of this letter just so the remainder of the board can see that. And that's what the attachment A is. Any questions?
Well, I know for Larry and Adam and myself, this is our second time through, so I don't have any questions.
Nope,
I don't have any questions.
So these, this attachment,
Yes.
these were
Attachment A.
Attachment A, these were recommendations that, for next year?
Well, these are just, I mean, to paraphrase, hey, we think you should do these things. As we observe, so if they said, hey, you know what, you deposit $100 and you wrote down $200, well, that's a problem, you should fix that. But there's some things that might come across and say, well, one that stands out, for example, for me is the third one. General fund charges other funds for the services that we provide. So the fire department, basically, a portion of the fire fund flows to the general fund to pay for the fact that we handle all their payroll, all of their HR. We collect the taxes that they levy for the millage, we pay all their bills, and so forth. And so we say, okay, well, the general fund is really, in essence, providing a service to the fire department, so the fire department transfers us a certain quantity of money on an annual basis. Same is true for water and sewer. Paul and his firm said, you know, you should from time to time really sit down and look at some method of saying, well, how do you calculate that? What is that number based on? Are you charging a fair amount to the fund? Maybe your procedures have changed and it doesn't cost you this much to take care of firefighters' payroll, paying their bills, collecting their taxes, so on and so forth. But as long as we do some sort of a, well, let's see, like I don't want to say an audit, but an estimate of saying, well, listen, we handle this many bills, we discussed in our meeting. 30% of the bills that we pay are for the fire department, so for the employee that pays bills, we should allocate 30% toward the fee that we charge the fire department, let's just say. If we have 100 employees and 30 of them are firefighters, then maybe 30% of the cost of payroll should be borne by the fire department. And add up all those things and then collectively say, that's what the general fund spends on an annual basis on behalf of the fire department. What is that number? If we haven't calculated in a while, then, you know, that might be a recommendation. Not like it's a flaw, like you're doing something wrong, but if you don't have something to back up that number, at some point, are you facing some potential liability? So these are like best practices maybe.
Things we'd like you to take a look at in the coming year, yeah.
And they've been listed, other things have been listed in the past, and we've done them. Some were eventually forced through maybe changes in GASB, which is kind of like the guidelines. But some of them were things like, hey, you should clean this up. I think our SAD stuff was one of those things like, hey, you ought to get this fund in order, square it up, and get it right. So it's not wrong, but it's lingering, so we did. Does that answer the question?
Yep. That none of these items negatively affect the audit, they were just essentially potential recommendations.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever looked at one of their recommendations and I'm like, man, that's crazy. Usually they're just good common sense and say, things that we can do better.
Yeah, an example might be a prior recommendation in the past has been, if you diversify your investments, you're gonna have a little bit better chance at having more of your money FDIC insured. You're maybe not necessarily gonna diversify it to where it's all insured, but dealing with one bank versus multiple banks, maybe the multiple banks are better. That was a recommendation we've seen in the past. That's something our treasurer has put into practice.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I just want to, this is a lot of work for our departments, especially the finance department, treasurer's department, water and sewer. It touches every department, but those are probably the three that do the most work in pulling stuff together. Want to commend them on their effort. They always do a great job, and even though they have everything else they're doing on their normal day-to-day, they drop it and they answer this as quickly as they can. So it's good for our community. Also, thank you, HY staff is always great, so it's been a pleasure to work with you guys.
It's a pleasure to work with you.
Yep, absolutely. That was gonna be my comment. Was that
It's
we
my
had-
department, I get to do it.
Well, no, my comment was gonna be about UHY and the fact that we're satisfied, we're happy with the work they did. I know this is kind of a backward compliment, but if your auditors are kind of annoying, then they're probably doing a good job. There's like, oh, I gotta find this, look it up, email it, but that's their job, right? So like, hey, do you have proof of this? You're like, I'm sure I do somewhere, and you gotta find it, and so I'm satisfied that on an annual basis, we have to Adam's point, do the work that's necessary to prove that we're going in the right direction. So thank you to everybody involved. There really isn't any board action that's
Do you
required.
need a
Okay.
motion to receive and file the 2021 audit?
All right, you wanna make that motion?
Sure.
All right, got a motion by Mr.
Support.
Witt, with support by Mr. Tominello to receive and file the 2021 audit. Any discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Good, thank you very much.
This evening.
Thank you guys.
Yeah. All right, next on our agenda is item D2, is that from your office, Mr. Witt?
I'd be happy to talk to it.
Just one more second before we move on.
Sure.
This,
Bobo.
when did you guys see this?
That's new,
That's new.
yeah. That's a summary, that's kind of like an executive summary.
Yeah, 'cause
We went through this page by page,
yeah,
right?
I was
is a
just
summary.
wondering if we could get this maybe next time, it might help me maybe not ask so many questions from I don't know who published this.
Yeah, it's generated by
Yes,
Mike.
sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
No problem.
Yep, that's all, that was my only
Yeah,
comment,
no
thank you.
problem. To be honest with you, I can't speak for you, but getting it in advance for me just creates a ton of questions. We're fortunate because the three of us get to sit one-on-one, walk through each thing, talk about it, understand it, but, I can tell you all about our water and sewer lift stations and infrastructure. I relate to that. They probably like, oh man, Ken's gonna ask these same dumb questions every year.
Well,
It's
I'll
just
ask them too then.
Yeah, yeah. It's a different discipline, so,
Okay, thank you.
all right, yeah?
Yeah, so the next item is our, as we discussed a little bit in the audit presentation, our special assessment revolving fund ended the year in a deficit. That's sort of the way it's set up because in past years we've expended that money in advance. So as required under the state law, we have to adopt a deficit elimination plan by resolution to show that this board is aware of the deficit and that we have a plan for correction. We do have a plan attached for you to review. Basically what it lays out is saying over the next 10 years, we expect to collect X amount of special assessments every year, and eventually we'll have paid it off, because that's the way special assessments work. If anything, usually these are, I think every year the number keeps going down, even when we add, because usually, people don't take the entire 10 years to pay off a special assessment.
Well,
There's
property transfer.
That's what I'm saying, there's a property transfer, or people pay up front and that kind of thing. So usually, I'd be surprised if we were still paying at the same rate as this scale, but this is our best guess at this point, so.
But this is really, this is not, this action is required by state law.
Correct.
It's not a result of something that's in error or something that was done improperly. In essence, we've incurred debt because we've self-financed SADs.
Yeah, but it really, at its core, it's a common sense thing to say like, hey, you guys saw the audit and you saw this one little thing, but were you paying attention to that section? So the board has to go through and say like, yes, we know. So if your community really is in some financial peril, the board has seen it, and the board has looked at it and made positive action to say, here's how we address it.
Right, the state is basically requiring the board as a whole to talk about this because this isn't something you're sneaking under the rug. Like, why do we have a deficit? The reason we have a deficit is because we self-finance these SADs.
And it's about as secure of a debt as you can get with liens against properties, so.
That's right. Yep. And in the long run, financing this, although it may not be as lucrative as it initially may seem, the reality is self-financing SADs does generate some interest income for the township. So we would be looking for a motion to approve the 2021 deficit elimination plan as presented.
So moved.
All right, is there support?
Support.
All right. Discussion, board members.
So just in this report, it was back in December, it was a 1.261 non-spendable because it was I wrote down SAD dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So between now and, is this same time frame? Is this the end of December? This 1.1 or, I mean, it's
Well,
100.
it says 1.233 as of January 1st, 2022.
What page you on, Brian?
Page number 9.
I just wanna make sure I know what you're.
I just wrote down,
So not all of the non-spendable money that's reserved in the general fund is related to the special assessment, there are other items.
so there's other things?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
That's,
it's pretty-
that's probably the majority.
But it is the vast
It's majority,
majority.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, yep.
Did someone make a motion?
Motion was made and seconded.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, does this require a roll call?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Mr. Tominelli?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Mackin?
Yes.
Mr. Olgiati is excused, Mrs. Rose is excused, Mr. Witt, yes, Mr. Verkest.
Yes. Thank you, board. Next on our agenda, item E1, regarding the discussion we had previously on an ordinance for sidewalks. We're looking to introduce an ordinance to amend Chapter 18 of the Charter Township of Harrison Code of Ordinances by creating Article 7 to establish the Township Sidewalk Maintenance and Repair Program and for repealer, severability, penalties, and effective date. At our last meeting, the board discussed considering sidewalk ordinance similar to our neighboring communities, which would require property owners to maintain and repair or replace their sidewalks. The township attorney has made the modifications that were discussed by the board 2 weeks ago, and the ordinance is before the board tonight for consideration and introduction. The ordinance, if introduced, will come back for adoption at a future meeting. We did talk about it at length. All of the changes that we discussed were made. So if there's discussion, we could have that, or questions. Otherwise, I'd be looking for a motion.
I thought we sort of talked about possibly figuring out how many slabs an estimate of what we thought.
Well, so
Maybe-
we did discuss the fact that we can solicit bids for the cost of repairing existing sidewalks. Two separate things. One is, we need an ordinance that says if you've got a broken sidewalk, you need to fix it. Second thing is, do we want to repair sidewalks? I still don't have the RFQ for the bike path from
Right.
Wade Trim, but we were gonna include in there several sections and try to get some kind of an estimate of what that cost is.
Is that-
But I'm seeing them as two separate things.
You know,
maybe-
I too feel that we need, this ordinance,
Mhm.
but I also, we're, when the Army Corps of Engineer hands over a pump station, it usually functions, right? And we take it over from there.
Okay.
I see the same thing when we tell people, okay, you're now responsible for your sidewalk. Doesn't function now, but you now have 60 days, even though it's brand new, or if it passes and goes into effect, that we are now giving them 60 days to fix their sidewalk, where we took, I mean, we were sort of responsible, and we're not a
Well,
sidewalk.
Yeah, no, I don't know that I would agree with that. There's never been a scenario where I've collected a dime of revenue for sidewalks. So and I'm not, just to your point, I would separate opinion with you if you'd say we were responsible. We really haven't had an established method. Have we repaired sidewalks in the past? Yeah. Have we repaired every broken sidewalk? No. But to say that we were responsible for it, now, the exception would be this: if I said I collect a millage for fire protection, you better believe I have to tell you now I am responsible for fire services, same with police. The library board collects a millage for libraries. But I'm not sure that I could say that I've ever had a dedicated revenue stream for sidewalks as much as, hey, let's put 5 or 10 grand in the budget, and every so often when there's a gap or a broken piece, it's just easier for us to fix it if we're already doing some work. So I would part ways with you if you say, hey, from here on out, we used to be fully responsible, now someone else is responsible. That doesn't mean you're wrong, I just disagree with that position. We've done sidewalk repairs in the past, on that I would agree. To say we were fully responsible and now someone else is responsible, I wouldn't paint it that way.
I think what Mr. Backens was asking about, there was conversation in our last board meeting about our water and sewer field supervisor had a spreadsheet maybe, and you were gonna say like, based on this, I'm gonna do a hillbilly calculation and say it's probably about this based on what some of our other.
There's 100
I
slabs.
guess my takeaway from that was that I was gonna have Wade Trim do that. I didn't know.
Oh, I
that
thought
was
we
gonna-
were just gonna, I thought that was.
I thought it was a wet thumb, because I actually had asked Mr. Axtell, do you have anything, what you could just share with us, if it's 50 slabs or 10,000 slabs, whatever it is.
Sure.
Just so we all knew before we
How many
vote on
slabs?
this, hey, if it, and I think somebody might have said even if it's $1,000, I won't agree with it, but that's fine, that's their, but if it's something reasonable, we're getting ready to dump 6 figures into a bike path, and I brought this up before, that probably has 50-60% residents on it. So I look at things just a little bit differently. My sidewalks, I'll pay for, I got no problem doing it, we need this ordinance to be in place.
Yep.
I'm just looking at how we start, that's all, that's my only.
And I apologize, I did not anticipate that I was bringing back to you a number as a part of this.
Well, this doesn't start today, right? So,
No, no.
we can have that conversation in the next 30,
Yeah,
what is it, 30 days when
the-
it comes back?
So you're better with the process of adopting the ordinance. This is gonna be on the next agenda likely, or you think it might skip?
It'll probably skip just noticing requests.
So we're probably talking about this in 4 weeks, so I could certainly have that number before that second reading.
Just a wet thumb, something.
Based on that, I'd make a motion to introduce an ordinance to amend chapter 18 of the Charter of Township of American Code of Ordinances by creating Article 7 to establish a township sidewalk maintenance and repair program and provide for repeal or severability penalties and effective date.
Okay, motion by Mr. Witt, is there support?
I'll support that.
All right, support by Mr. Brado. Any discussion?
I mean, I guess the only thing we're gonna get an estimate on bad sidewalks, an estimate to repair bad sidewalks. Then that's gonna be a whole nother discussion on how we're gonna allocate, if at all, how we're going to manage that or not manage that.
Well, we're gonna manage it,
We're
with the
gonna
question
manage
is
it
whether
from a
we're
perspective
gonna
on.
pay for it or
right,
not.
Okay, so maybe management isn't the correct word.
Yeah.
Maybe it's to fund it.
Yeah, how it's gonna be funded, it could be us, could be someone else, or it could be a division.
And to Mr. Backens' point, if there, I think, sort of echoing what you said, I think is there are two separate issues that we have to
Yeah, no, I
discuss.
understand.
But there is a bit of an overlap there that we should do them at the same time.
I agree we need it, but I'm just saying the starting line is sort of the thing that I.
Yeah, that's fair, fair enough. All right, any other discussion? Hearing none, seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, does this require a roll call?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Backens?
Yes.
Mr. Olgiati is excused, Mrs. Rose is excused, Mr. Tominelli?
Yes.
Mr. Burkowski?
Yes. Thank you, Board. Next on our agenda, item E2, regarding amendment number 7 to the water service contract with the Great Lakes Water Authority. Board members, Harrison Township renewed our contract with the Detroit Water and Sewer Department, DWSD, in 2010. The Great Lakes Water Authority, or GLWA, was formed as a successor to DWSD. Our contract includes a reopener every 4 years. This is a time when we can review our usage, as well as any new construction or large commercial users, and renegotiate our contract accordingly. Probably more meaningful in communities where they're not fully developed and they might have changing demands. We met with GLWA this April. We reviewed changes to how the rates are calculated, and we reviewed historical data as well as improvements to our system. Specifically, peak hour and max day numbers are critical to determining the rate we pay. So at any given point during the day, there's the peak hour, the hour in which the most water flows per unit of time. So whether it's millions of gallons per day, or whether, so we talk about a flow just like miles per hour, gallons per day. And a max day is the biggest, the amount of water that you consume in any day. Hard to get away from a max day number. The max, it is what it is. You'd have to store up massive amounts of water, but the peak hour is something we can have an impact on. GLWA has adopted new methods for determining these figures, as well as how the figures impact our rates. GLWA did set up user groups, advisory groups, so as opposed to this third party coming up with rate structures, there's a process by which member communities participate in that negotiation, work toward best practices. So there's a lot more input on behalf of customers today. But what that means is some of the methods of calculating our rates and how rates should be established have changed. I'll say in the past, if we go back far enough in DWSD, there were individual communities who might more efficiently negotiate their rates and come out with lower figures compared to other communities. Negotiation really shouldn't be a part of a rate structure. I shouldn't be able to convince you to give me a better deal than my neighboring community. So they've moved toward using data, actual data of usage. So when you say, okay, well, we're gonna buy 99,000 units of water in the next 12 months. All right, how'd you come up with that figure? Well, that's what we did for the last 3 years. We took the last 3 years, we averaged them out. 99,000 units of water is what we consume. Seems like a logical way of doing it. But if I were to convince someone to base our rates on only 90,000 units of water, then my share of the total system is a smaller percentage. If I really sell or purchase 100,000 units of water, I kind of beat the system. So they've put in a lot of ways that eliminate chances for negotiation, some might say corruption. It's just a better system. In these renegotiations, GLWA's opening position was that our numbers should be increased. Our rate is based on these numbers. So at that peak hour, they basically measure on a regular, constant basis how close you get to that peak number. Hey, we're never going to exceed this number. I think it's 4.8, and they wanted us at 5.09, something like that. Well, you were pretty close to 4.8, so we think you should raise the number. Well, our position was that the improvements to our controls and the change to this new pressure reducing valve, or PRV, and our number 1 meter pit, HR01, which is right at the water tank at Union Lake and Metro Parkway, having a quicker reacting PRV and better data will cause us to have more accurate controls and better accurately shave those numbers and utilize the storage tank. So our position was that, hey, give us a chance to put our new controls in place. So this agreement is a 4-year agreement starting in 2023. It's our intention, it starts in 2023, but in the year 2023, we're maintaining our current number. So I should have that specifically, that number, I apologize. max day and peak hour. So if we look at page 255 in the board packet, this shows our historical numbers as well as our projected numbers. And I'm going to direct you, if you're at page 255, to the furthest column on the right that's labeled peak hour. So you see there's two columns on the right there, max day and peak hour, right? Max day is what it is. This is how much water we consume. And as time goes on, usage is starting to change as people have more modern faucets, toilets, things like that. As the cost of water goes up, people are more mindful of the water they consume. Appliances are more efficient. Max day is not something we're really worried about. But the peak hour, if you look back in 2010, during the hottest time of the day and the hottest day of the year, we were moving 7.25 million gallons per day, even though overall we're only at about 4 million gallons per day. But during that time, we were almost flowing twice as much, right? So if you see, as we go down that chart, in 2014, we were able to drop that number to 420, 4.2, and that was because of the tank. We've since adjusted that number because we had some exceedances, and we're currently, if you look at 2022, we're currently at 4.75 million gallons per day as our peak hour flow rate. GLWA said that number is too close to what you're actually doing. We haven't exceeded 4.75, but you're getting too close to it, and we think you should have a 10% buffer. So based on your actual numbers, we think you should be at 5.09, which increases our rate. What we said was, for the next 4 years, give us 1 year at 4.75, that's 2023. We're saying that this summer, we'll have our controls in place. We'll operate the tank with the new controls and the new PRV and the new data input coming from their meter pit. We'll operate that for the 2023 season, and then we're agreeing that if we do nothing, we'll take your increase of 5.09. But we are confident that by the end of 2023, we'll be able to demonstrate the data from operating the system with our new controls and our new PRV, and we'll be able to, based on that data, go back to GLWA and say for 24 through 26, we don't want 5.09. There's no guarantees, we have to prove the data, but we basically got 1 year at the current figure to be able to demonstrate that we can make the improvements that we need to. So in a nutshell, that's what this negotiation centered around.
Mr. Burkess?
Yeah.
Has the Great Lakes Water Authority suggested that the township would benefit from a sprinkling ordinance, or was that part of the discussions?
We haven't, I mean, there are discussions, we've had discussions about that. Unlike maybe, say, like a Shelby Township, where it becomes difficult is we have enough people that might be in a waterfront area where they're using a sprinkler system that they're drawing from the canal. So in the past, when we've talked about it, we felt that enforcement could be more difficult. But certainly, that's an option that we can look at to further, ensure that we don't have that problem. Our goal is that we can overcome that. Our hope and our goal is we can overcome it with the tank. But they haven't offered that as a method of changing our rates.
Have they told us the time of the day that the pressure is on for the?
Oh yeah, we see it. We have access to the data. We can read it
About
ourselves.
what time is it?
It's usually in the morning. It's usually first.
Starting at like,
Yeah.
it's 5 till.
Yeah, it's really closer. It's usually right before 6 a.m., right in that morning time. It varies. You can see it's odd times. We see it. Our bigger problem, I shouldn't say our bigger problem, where we struggle a little bit more is we don't have a daytime population. We have an evening, I shouldn't say that. We have a diminished daytime population, but we have a spike on hot days and weekends when people are at marinas. So I've got not only our residents at home and they're consuming water, but how many boat slips times how many people using a hose or filling something up, or, right? So we've got that spike in weekend, like we'll see it at, like, 4th of July is a Monday this year. That is probably gonna be our worst day,
Yeah.
But that is an option. It's something we can look at. It hasn't been a part of our negotiations in recent years.
Okay.
I wanna say we talked about it, and they said
We
it.
did an odd even thing for some time, and we talked about it.
No, but I mean specifically with GLWA, and they said like it's not gonna impact your rates in our calculation.
Yeah, so, I will say this, GLWA is very proactive in coming forward, bringing, so in those meetings, we've got, the attorney is there, Gal kind of overseeing the whole process is there, but they've got engineers, they've got folks that are looking at our data, they're providing data to us, kind of doing an analysis, saying this is what we think you ought to do. So they are pretty proactive in trying to, bring things to the table. So bottom line, this contract has, this amendment has some boilerplate changes. There's some changes to how we pay our rates and how they were calculated. There's some things that are just obsolete. But the primary meat and potatoes for us is the fact that in year one of this 4-year contract, in 2023, we were able to negotiate keeping our rate as it is. But in order for us to be able to keep that for the other 3 years, we've got to put that tank in operation and show a year of operating data, take that back to GLWA, and renegotiate for years 2 through 4. If we can't demonstrate that improvement, then that 5.09 is basically what the work groups have agreed. Here's your peak. You didn't go over your number, but you didn't have a 10% buffer. You were too close to the number, and we think you should be 10% away. And that's what they're using to calculate everybody's peak hour rate. So the long and short of it is, I recommend the approval of this amendment because I do believe in the short term it keeps our rates low, and it gives us the time we need to make improvements to the operation of the tank to prove that we can keep these numbers within the rules. So I'll be looking for, I don't know if there's discussion questions or if there is a motion to execute Amendment 7.
Well, when I was looking at this earlier today, do you know, their letter mentions deleting some of the Exhibit A and some of the Exhibit B? And Exhibit B is what we just talked about, right? The charts and all that stuff. But what was Exhibit A? Do you happen to know?
Yeah, it's right, it's page 246. This, I should say 246, 247, So what happens is, this is kind of boilerplate language. This is saying, this is your system, this is what you have, and this is what you do,
I just didn't know if they made changes.
What they do, they wipe out the old one, they bring in the new one, but it's blah, blah.
Okay.
So it's not, the Exhibit A is kind of like, hey, we made changes to the meter pit, so we want to update our drawings. And then Exhibit B is all of the numbers that define our rates. So when we do these, if we look back to prior amendments, they say, yeah, we strike Exhibit A and B, and here's a new Exhibit A and B. That's just historically what they do. They don't say, well, we changed this line of Exhibit B or this page or whatever. They just, it's forget the old one, this is now the new one, so to speak.
Make a motion to execute amendment number 7 to the water service contract between the Great Lakes Water Authority and the Charter Township of Harrison as presented.
Motion by Mr. Witt, is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Badkins. Discussion, questions?
I know you can't really compliment yourself, but sitting through the discussions with GLWA, the work that we wouldn't be at this rate without some of the effort you put in during that conversation. I mean, their entire team was dead set. We were doing different. We were going to be higher. And I think that was the way it was heading. I mean, I don't mean to pat you too hard on the back, but it was.
Go ahead.
We wouldn't be where we were without your effort. So I think it's important to share that.
Well, I appreciate that. Some of it is, as I said, when we're talking about the audit, I ask the same dumb questions because it isn't intuitive to me. But this system, I feel like I have a better handle on, and and I think it's important to. I'll say the GLWA team, super cool. I think compared to some of the folks that we had dealt with in prior years, they've really made improvements, and we're, as a region, we're going in the right direction. These are good people, so thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, we have a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Badkins regarding adoption of approval of amendment number 7. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. Next are the 2 additional items we added. Item E3 specifically was the invoice for Telto Contracting. Telto is one of the contractors that we regularly do work with. They help us out with, I should say, they're a provider for sand and gravel, different things like that. But they are an underground contractor as well, and if you might recall, we did have a water main break on Joy Boulevard, and it reached the point where we were unable to do the work in a safe manner. We lost a lot of water, ground conditions were very soft, and I had emailed the board letting them know that this was one of the rare instances that we need to call in a contractor in order to perform a water main break. Honestly, the last time I remember a contractor helping out in a water main break was when the one broke, the main one coming across the 20-inch by I-94 and Metro Parkway. There might have been one other time when we had multiple breaks and we just couldn't hit them, but it doesn't happen very often. As I said, conditions were unsafe. Our dig box was too small and our excavator was too small. They brought in the equipment on demand and worked from, I don't know, by the time they got there, it's 6 p.m. till 3:30 in the morning with their equipment. We really didn't have a choice. We you know, if I have to pay someone $5,900 once every 5 or 10 years, I think we're probably pretty well positioned. But it was an emergency expenditure. I did tell the board about it. The invoice is here, so I'm looking for a motion to approve the payment to Telto Contracting in the amount of $5,924.
I'll make that motion.
All right. Is there support?
Support.
All right. Support by Mr. Corrado. Any discussion?
Was this the water main break that was caused by another contractor, or no?
Yes and no. Yes, it is, but it wasn't really caused by another contractor. So I did send out a follow-up email because you had said, hey, how is this going to be covered? Who's paying for it? What's difficult, so the damage was caused by a contractor working for the Department of Roads driving in posts for a guardrail underneath I-94.
Yep.
When we get, so the key here is the short answer is they caused the damage. Why did they cause the damage? They called for a staking, and one of our clerical personnel read the request that came from Miss Digg, and it said that the staking was in Mount Clemens. It's very near the border, but it was, so they had the Miss Digg was a little bit confusing, and it said the work was in Mount Clemens. The diagram showed that the work was under I-94, which would be in Harrison Township. So there was I guess I'll call it a good faith effort on the part of a clerical person to say, hey, there isn't a need to stake this, which meant that it didn't go to the work order person, and we didn't stake the fact that there was an 8-inch water main there. So the contractor really wasn't at fault because we failed in our responsibility to stake that, the presence of that water main. So we did make some changes into how we handle those. Again, you know, this is not something that happens regularly.
Yeah.
It was a little confusing. I'm not gonna say it was this person's fault, that person's fault, but we've made some changes to how we handle those missed dig tickets, because this would have been avoided if we would have staked the water main. So I don't know if that answers your question, or?
Yeah, so it was this charge, and then we had some.
Oh, we incurred expenses for sure. Yeah, we had guys there working all night. By the call, I'll bet you came to me at about 3 or 3:30, where the foreman, where Justin had said, you know, Ken, we've tried putting sheets in, the problem is the dig box, as it goes down, has braces to support but the way this water main, the way this break occurred, typically you get like a punch, a hole or a shear. This was, the way it got hit, it ripped out about a 4-foot section of the water main. And the problem is we couldn't dig a big enough hole. Our dig box was too small, so we couldn't dig out the pipe. It was, you know, so they tried putting in sheeting, and it just kept giving way, and he made the judgment call that just was not safe, and we need something bigger. So So they probably worked on it from noon to 4 and then, you know, made the call for these guys to come out. But we continued to work on it throughout the night.
Yeah, I guess I just look at it this way, that you had said that we had a good faith effort to stake it, but the contractor ultimately is responsible.
Well, not if it's not staked. How could if I never told them
If
there's a water main
I'm
there?
gonna dig a hole in the ground, it's up to me.
No, but once
No,
you
it's
call,
not.
once
You
you
call
call
Miss Dig, if Miss Dig doesn't tell you there's a water main and you hit it, how can it be your fault?
Yeah, once you call Ms. Dig, you've completed your requirements.
Right, we never marked the fact that there was a water main there, so they had no way of knowing it, so striking it, they struck our asset, and we never told them it was there. We told them there was nothing there, because it wasn't staked.
Okay,
But
well,
we did get the note.
from my experience in construction,
Yeah,
the contractor's responsible. It doesn't matter, if I put anything in the ground, I had a crane fall over
Mhm.
because there was a storm sewer under the ground, 6 feet,
Mhm.
that had washed out. The crane flipped over, you know whose responsibility it was? Not the crane guy, it was mine,
yeah.
because I didn't know what was underground. So I would argue that point, because this was probably a $10,000-$20,000 repair.
Yeah, but it's the same point, Brian. In your story, the crane operator is the guy that's driving pipes for Department of Roads, not you. We're you. We didn't tell them what was underneath there. In your story, you know what I mean? Why'd the crane fall over? Because something washed out underneath. Why'd the guy hit it underneath there? Because someone didn't tell him there was something underneath. It wasn't his decision.
So if you don't know, you don't go. That's how construction works. If you don't know, you don't go. So.
Well, yeah, but you do know, we told you. We told the contractor there were no assets there.
Oh, well then that's different. I
Yeah,
thought we just,
by not staking, there's nothing there.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't say there might be something, so to give you an example, sometimes we say, hey, you're gonna have to hand dig, or you're gonna have to hydro excavate, or
Sure.
you're gonna have to use some other construction method, because we're not sure. We said, no assets. We replied to Miss Dig saying, we have no assets. in
I
the ground."
misunderstood the
Yeah,
story.
no, it's okay, and that's why I'm saying it, if I felt that I could go after somebody for this, I would. What I would say is this was an unfortunate incident that meant that some folks were without water for a while, we had to spend some money. When I look at it on the bigger picture, this is not something I can recall happening in over 11 years of me being supervisor. This is a fluke. It was something that was missed, and we've improved.
And we have
our
processes
internal-
in place to keep
Correct.
it from happening again.
Absolutely.
Okay, I misinterpreted how,
How
Yeah, I apologize.
It's all right. Any other questions, discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, we got a motion by Mr. Badkins with support by Mr. Brado to pay Telto Contracting $5,924 for the repairs at Joy 994 water main break. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Board. The next one was something that had just come in a short time ago. So typically in the spring, summer months, we will go back and do concrete repair to places where we've had to remove concrete for water main breaks and repairs. Before you are 4 locations where there's concrete that needs to be replaced, some sidewalks, concrete, driveway approaches at 4 locations. This does come up from year to year. In the past, we have solicited bids. We struggle getting competitive bids because every time we've gone out for competitive bid on this concrete work, Premier Concrete has been the low bidder. And so this proposal was brought to me. With our current conditions in construction, I don't think things have gotten any better or easier with regards to being able to solicit bids. And this fellow's done great work for us. I bet you if we look back, probably the same contractor we've used for these springtime concrete repairs for the last 4 or 5 years at least. So I've got and I know it makes some folks uncomfortable, I've got a single proposal. Just when you consider it, doing concrete work at 4 different locations, removing, saw cutting, putting down a new base, pouring and finishing at 4 locations, 10 grand is really a pretty competitive number if you know about that work. And the fact is, we struggle just getting someone else who will even quote it, and again, so far, no one's ever beat them. So I am bringing you a proposal for concrete repair at 4 locations in the amount of $10,000. And if there's questions, discussion, or a motion.
How often do we use Premier?
We
Are they
usually,
like our Premier guy? Get it?
you might say that, yeah. I mean, this work is usually a once a year kind of a thing, not to say that there aren't other times that we do concrete work for something else, but typically, kind of bundle these up, do them once a year. So, if we were to look back, we would probably be able to see this same contractor having done work. If you remember when we had to remove a section of North Point Parkway, when we had to temporary bypass pump across the road, they did that work. That was bundled with some of the other work that they
Was
did.
it right at Coleridge?
Yeah, right, yep, just, what would that be, just south of Coleridge.
Do you know if North Plain Parkway is on the list for,
It is not,
it's
as
just
far as
been
I know.
carpet bombed on both ends?
It's rough, it is definitely rough. It's ironic that the original stretch is in some cases better shape than the new stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a whole explanation for that, there's a word for it, I don't recall, but it's a concrete mix issue.
So the only, I guess, when I look at their terms, right, because this is their quote,
Mhm.
are we agreeing to pay the penalty if it's not paid within 10 days? The 1.5% at 18% rate, and they don't guarantee no cracks, no flaking or chips. So this is where I go back to, I believe we need a contract. People are gonna do work for us, it should be our terms and conditions, not what they want. Because I don't know how many bills we can pay in 10 days. And I'm not saying they're going to assess it, but it's on there, so I would say like, maybe we do a workshop this winter, we talk about these types of contracts where we have these one-offers that are really good contractors, and Mr. Verkes, to your point, you probably couldn't get 2 other people to come look at $10,000 worth of concrete, right?
Right.
So I get that part of it.
It's a challenge.
I would just like it to be something that's more written to what we want to see, not what the contractor wants. And if they'll sign, I'll say, an agreement with us, then we have somebody under contract that, go fix a driveway for us that we broke up or whatever. So maybe we can talk about that in another time. But I'll make a motion to pay Premier Concrete the $10,000 for the 4 repairs and the 4,000, or the 21 AA crushed concrete that they used.
All right, good. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Tamanello. Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's, there's definitely value in what you're saying, right? What I would say is when we find, just like Telto, I don't know what, I don't know what we agreed to. They just showed up with a bunch of equipment and started digging a hole, you know what I mean?
I think that's an exception. You had to do that.
It is, but I guess my point is when we're dealing with a repeat contractor that's done quality work, you know what I mean? And it's the same guy, somebody didn't sell the business, it's, it's gonna be the same fella showing up that we see each time. And I guess I'm making an excuse, you do get a little bit comfortable because you just know you're dealing with, good people. But that doesn't excuse saying, oh, I agree to this and there's no guarantee on that, and
He'd probably never charge us for that. If it cracked or split, he'd probably be out there busting it out, right?
Yep.
And sometimes, it's a fine line, because we can use the contract we use for CDBG work and we'll get nobody to bid on $10,000 worth of concrete. You know what I mean?
We just tried to source the work at the senior center, and people are like, it's too small of a job to do all those hoops we gotta jump through.
Yeah, but I'm sure if we sat down with this guy, we could probably come up with something.
Right, but for the amount of $10,000 contracts we have to fine tune contracts, we're gonna spend way more than the cost of maybe one burn job here and there, sometimes.
I think once you set, I'll say, terms and conditions for doing service work, if you wanna call it that, with the township.
Yeah.
I think once you have that contract in place, it would be pretty easy to implement. So I think we could probably figure it out.
Sure. All right, other discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, we've got a motion by Mr. Badkins with support by Mr. Tominello to source the concrete repairs at 4 locations to Premier Concrete at a cost of $10,000. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Board. That's the end of our agenda, minus the public and board comments. So we'll open the floor for public comments. We ask that you try to limit them to 5 minutes in length.
No.
Board members, residents, C. William Bardell, 25-year resident, clean cut, do-gooder boy next door. Clean up, fix up, people helping people. I just want to tell everyone, stay safe this Independence Day weekend, and the beginning of next week. Pace yourself. Also, check out Save Lake St. Clair on Facebook and follow, keep up to date on what's going on. Also, Ken, I'm gonna need to speak with you probably for a whole 90 seconds after the meeting. A couple of things I just wanna go over with you. Probably take a whole 90 seconds of your time. With that, members, have a wonderful Independence Day, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. Move back to board comment. Any comments, board members?
Well, I guess, while Mr. Witt was busy slapping you on the back, no one slapped him on the back. So you have, apparently we have a celebrity amongst us?
We do. We have the newest president of the Michigan, I don't know, Michigan Clerks.
Michigan Association of Municipal Clerks.
Yep.
I have a t-shirt.
Yeah,
MAMC.
it's a good
I
one,
have
yeah.
one of the t-shirts.
Well, congratulations, Mr. Witt. Your hard work is appreciated by myself and I'm sure plenty of other residents.
And so how much do you get paid for that additional leadership role?
Exactly $0.
Oh, sweet.
You know, I couldn't do it without the support of my staff to be able to, you know, spend some of those times, you know, like a couple weeks ago, I had to go meet with the Secretary of State and the Attorney General to go like have some of those kind of level meetings, and having a great staff allows you to do that. So
This is why your staff wants you to get this job.
yeah, that's what I'm going more. Yeah.
Yeah, they were surprised. Yeah, they were very supportive of you
Very
applying.
supportive.
It's interesting you say that. A lot of additional
And I
responsibility.
think it's a testament of your ability, so
Yeah, absolutely.
thank you for everything you do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
well, I'll say I was with a group of peers and they were, I don't know if they were complaining about clerks. Maybe they might have been. And I said, wow, I have no complaints, man. You know, they're saying, this is going on. This is,
Yeah.
not in Harrison Township. So,
Yep.
but, so good. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there support?
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries, meeting adjourned. Thank you, board.